Hello everyone, my name is Hillary and along with Ashley, we did our presentation on sex trafficking controlled by organized crime groups in China.
So here is a quick overview of what we will be discussing throughout our presentation. So Hillary will start us off by discussing the history of sex trafficking and how it is controlled by organized crime groups in China. Next, she will be discussing the current state of the issue and how it is impacting people in China as well. And after that, I will be talking about the recruitment of women, followed by how women are transported as well. And then Hillary will talk about the understanding of the one-child policy. And after that, I will be talking about how women are forced and housed into prostitution, followed by the conclusion to sum up our main arguments on our topic.
To be able to understand what the history of sex trafficking in China is, one first must be able to understand the definition of sex trafficking. Trafficking is the movement of people with force, fraud, or deception to have the trafficked persons participate in exploiting labor. Sex trafficking is the movement of people with force, fraud, or deception to have the trafficked persons participate in sexual labor. China is a source, transit, and destination country for trafficked women and children who are forced into sexual exploitation. In China, as a result of the one-child policy, the scarcity of women in Chinese society has led to organized crime groups creating the illegal business of human trafficking by kidnapping and selling women in China. There are many forms that trafficking takes in China, but some of the main ones are buying trafficked women for the purpose of having a bride, buying male children, and selling female children. Sex trafficking is a serious crime universally. However, the economic benefits of sex trafficking outweigh the risk of being convicted of this crime. Therefore, organized crime groups continue to participate in this illegitimate business. Currently, sex trafficking in China continues to present itself in high levels and continues to be a pressing human rights issue in China. There still continues to be a gender disparity, which continuously provides motivation for further sex trafficking as a solution to males seeking marriage arrangements, as well as sex workers. Additionally, the Chinese government continues to do the bare minimum to respond to the intensity of trafficking in China, although they have enacted legislation to respond to trafficking. They seldom report whether corrupt officials who have benefited from sex trafficking and organized crime have been investigated or criminally convicted. It will be difficult to address sex trafficking when gender disparity continues and provides motivation for trafficking of women and children. Additionally, while the Chinese government fails to comply with a higher level of response to this organized crime, women will continue to be victimized.
So the recruitment of women. Sex trafficking violates the victim's human rights, and in most cases, organized crime groups target women that are in rural areas and low-income families. So the majority of women are often trafficked between the ages of 14 and 25. So sex traffickers will target women that are young and vulnerable, so it is easy for them to kidnap and coerce them into commercial sex. For sex traffickers will also approach their victims in various ways. This would be including contacting them through social media, ads on the internet for potential career opportunities, or in most cases, they will either threaten or kill their victims as well. And furthermore, sex traffickers will also promise their victims money, free travel expenses, and financial aid for their families as a token of their trust. So even though they use these types of tactics, these guarantees are fabricated, and women are often exploited without the ability to even report these incidents. And the failure to report the incident may also result in the fear of being deported or incarcerated for their actions of the sex traffickers. The transportation of women between cities and other countries involve complicated routes organized and deliberate plans, and long distance travel. So, sex traffickers will transport their victims far away from their families to avoid the risk of being caught and the risk of their victims escaping. So, due to the frequent transportations of women, it is often difficult for law enforcement to track down their perpetrators. So, for example, sex traffickers will often hide their victims in places where they know that law enforcement will not look. So, this, for example, is shipping containers. With the outrageous maltreatment, women are often injured or dead throughout the transportation within different locations. And we found that altogether these experiences force women to stay within the sex trade and have also been a leading cause to China's gender imbalances of the one-child policy.
In the 1950s, 1960s, and 1970s, Mao Zedong, the People's Republic of China authoritarian leader, encouraged Chinese families to reproduce greatly and further praised large families for not using any form of birth control. However, this led to overpopulation, which led to one of the biggest famines in Chinese history. The one-child policy was created in 1979 as a measure to prevent future famines following the Great Chinese Famine. It was meant as a form of population growth control, but ultimately yielded several issues. Although the policy states in its name that it is a one-child only, there are several exceptions for the birth of a second child to families. If the pregnancy results in twins, both children are legally allowed to be born. Additionally, families who live in rural areas or that have a firstborn with disabilities are allowed to procreate once more. If the parents are only children, they too are allowed to birth a total of 2 children. Going from one extreme, which was to reproduce as much as possible, to the other extreme of limiting births so much that families could only have one birth, was an improper solution to a massive problem. The one-child policy has also created a disproportion in gender ratio within the nation, as in Chinese culture, birthing sons is much more celebrated and has caused gendercide in China. Gendercide could start from the womb with selective abortions of female fetuses to abandonment or murder at birth of a child if it is female. The reason being is that many families do not want to spend their one chance of a child on a female, as they cannot carry on the family legacy. Because of the one-child policy and gendercide, men who seek to get married often find themselves between a rock and a hard place, searching for women to marry. The disparity in the ratio of men to women make it challenging for families to find available and suitable partners for their male children. Therefore, they resort to illegal means of human trafficking to obtain access to women for their sons to marry. Females who reside in rural areas are constant targets for underground marriage markets, and female children are often sold to allow for families to try conceiving for a male child. Therefore, the one-child policy has created an arena where women are highly sought after and are a very lucrative business. With continued disparity of gender ratios, this business will continue to be fed and will continue to present itself as a problem.
Last but not least, we have forced and housed into prostitution. So with the stated information, most parents from rural areas in China are not ideally supportive of their daughters because they solely rely on their sons. So we found that the gender imbalance and lack of support for female children in China have propelled some women towards prostitution. Forced prostitution is a common form of sex trafficking, but it is not the only method of recruiting women into the sex trade, as you can tell from our recruitment slide. So we found that women are often vulnerable to prostitution, usually struggle with poverty, lower educational attainment levels, and have dysfunctional families. We also found that women as young as 12 years old are passed through criminal organizations as sex slaves and are forced into marriage. This is due to the recruitment and physical violence. Women are often forced to accept more than 10 customers a day without any incentives, and if they attempted to refuse or escape their captors, they would either be beaten, tortured, or threatened with death for their misbehaviors. Many victims are sold and resold many times, and once they are missing, they are rarely found. So despite the criminal organization's involvement in forcing women into prostitution, the government needs to provide holistic support for victims of sex trafficking. To conclude, sex trafficking has been a prevalent issue in China for centuries. Chinese organized crime groups lure women from rural areas through threats and fabricated promises. The one-child policy is a social policy that has led to many disparities. With the lack of support that women receive from family members, it has been a leading cause for increasing rates in sex trafficking. And in order to mitigate the increasing rates of sex trafficking, the Chinese government needs to increase the penalty of the offense, as well as implement prevention techniques to prevent sex trafficking from occurring. Still, with the stated perspectives, we are given a clear understanding as to why such behavior may occur. Here is a list of references we used throughout our presentation, and thank you for tuning in. I hope you have a great day.